Hey everyone. So here we have chapters 24 through 26, probably some of the most straightforward chapters in the book, in the sense that basically the fever reaches its peak, its worst moment. We actually see how it affects children. And then right when it reaches its highest point, the climax of the story, we hit our resolution. We go into a frost, the fever starts to die down, people start to return to the town, everything seems like it's getting better. Okay, so that's really what we're looking at here. And if it's chapter 26, it's got to deal with the frost. If it's anything before that, it's got to deal with the fever reaching its highest point. So what does the arrival of the frost in chapter 26 symbolize for the people of Philadelphia? And so I thought about this, right? Just want to talk about it a little bit. This frost kind of comes right after all of the heat in chapter 25. Like it's really, you feel it. There's been moments in this book where I've been reading with you all, and I've seen her questions, and she's like, "Oh yeah, explain the heat in this situation," and I go, "Eh." But like, there's a point in this, I don't remember if it's 24 or 25, where Eliza comes home. The boys are extremely warm from their fever. Nell is basically passed out from her fever, and Eliza's like, "What are you doing with the door with the window closed? Open the window." And Maddie goes, "It is open. It's all," and she goes to try to open it. It's all the way up. It's so hot outside that it feels like the window's not even open. It just doesn't change anything with the temperature. It's just so hot. And then we see this frost, right? So the same thing here. How does the climax of the story, the night Maddie and Eliza stay awake to cool the children, affect the resolution in chapter 26? So really, that part of the story is, to me, the part where we are most in what the fever looks like, what the fever is for Maddie, because before that, she never really experiences it as much as she does in this instance, to me anyway. And so it's at its most intense. It's the definition of a climax, right? It's the most intense moment of the story, but the conflict has reached its height, right? Either we're going to survive this fever tonight and something better is going to come, or we're going to die from this fever tonight and then nothing is going to come, right? That's what a climax is. A climax is where that conflict with this fever is finally at its highest point. And so how does chapter 26, right, change that? Or how is it impacted by that? Identify one decision Maddie makes in chapter 25 that proves she has moved from a static character to a dynamic character. You could pick moments throughout this story, right? Beginning of the story. If she had remained a static character, if she was an unchanged, no changing character, she would be the same girl we saw at the beginning that doesn't want to get out of bed, that doesn't want to work, that doesn't want to help anyone, very lazy, all of these things. What is she now? Okay. But also, not even just her work ethic, but her decision making, right? She's changed so much in such a short period of time. The author uses the sound devices of the first sharp wind in chapter 26. How does the sound contribute to the shift in mood from chapter 25? So I thought about this, and it's interesting when you see something like first sharp wind, because to me, right, first sharp wind, it normally may bring a negative connotation. The sharp wind cut through me to my bone. Like that's what I think of with a sharp wind, right? A sharp wind is like a knife cutting through the air. It's so cold that you feel it everywhere. So here, though, it's been so stifling hot, so miserable because of this heat, and now we have a sharp wind. So is it better? Is it worse? Is it a positive connotation? Is it a negative connotation? Now, imagery, we keep talking about sight, sound, touch, taste, smell. What imagery does the author use to describe the children's fever in the dark coffee house? Does this create a tone of hopelessness or determination? It's a two-part question here, right? First off, what imagery? So find the imagery. I've already found it for you. Any of these quotes will work as some of the imagery. You pick the one that you like the most, the one that's not as the least gross to you, maybe. And then hopelessness or determination. What are we seeing based on the quote that you've chosen? Think about it. What's the tone? Those are your two choices, though. You either say hopelessness or determination based on this quote. Okay, moving on to our next question here. How does Maddie's first... Oh, by the way, this is in page 86 and 87, but I did copy and paste it here for you. How does Maddie's first-person narration of the frost help the reader understand her relief on a personal level? It's kind of funny. Well, not funny, but we continue to talk. Again, I know I have to keep saying we continue to talk, but we have talked a lot about this first-person point of view. And, how would it be different if I told it? If one of you told this story, how would this frost be different? How would the reaction to grandfather's death be different, et cetera, et cetera? How are things made different because we are seeing them from Maddie's point of view? How are we like what about this story are we understanding differently because it's from Maddie's point of view? And so here it's no different, right? At first, she thinks it's a dream. She's like, she can't even believe it really is. There's cold air coming. She can't even believe it, right? So, and then it moves into that relief. How or why? Like, how does that happen? How does the physical setting of the coffee house change once the frost arrives? How does this impact the health of the characters? It's a pretty straightforward question. Pages 26, 88 through 89. See how the coffee house is now different, literally from what did I say earlier? 86 and 87, 2 pages before. How is it vastly different on these 2 pages later than it was before? Historical novels are often used real events to solve a character's problem. How does the real historical event of the 1793 frost solve Maddie's central conflict? We keep talking about this frost, so it's just a similar question to earlier, but it wants you to tie it into the historical. Like, so we use something that actually happened in 1793 to also show us the end of this main conflict that she's been having. All right, in chapter 26, Maddie says the frost was a white lace veil over the city. Identify the type of figurative language and explain what it reveals about how Maddie's view of the city has changed. So, you already know. I don't know where this is in this book, but maybe it was there, and I'm a skimmer, guys. I've told you this before, so maybe I skimmed over it. So maybe it's there. Regardless, what type of figurative language is the frost was a white lace veil over the city? And then think about it. What does that symbolize? What is white lace supposed to symbolize? What does it symbolize as it's blanketing the city? Kind of a multi-way to answer that question, okay? Now, here we have our RTQTs. Analyze how the theme of rebirth is developed in chapter 26 as the market reopens. Use specific details about the returning citizens to support your answer. What does rebirth mean? And that'll help you with answering this question. Explain how the following action in chapter 26 of the farmers and neighbors, the return of the farmers and neighbors, provide a contrast of the initiating event of the fever's arrival. So this you've got to compare and contrast earlier chapters when they leave to now later chapters when they've come back. And how is that different? How is it similar? Evaluate the role of Eliza as a mentor in these chapters. How does her influence over Maddie help the protagonist successfully navigate the final stage of the plot? This was an interesting question to me because I honestly don't know if Eliza could have survived without Maddie and vice versa. But it is an interesting question to kind of think about how they play off of one another. Analyze the author's word choice when describing the return of the people from the country. How does a dialogue between the returning citizens and those who stay create a sense of conflict? I didn't think there was really enough here. I didn't love this question. It's there. It's just really difficult to find some of the quotes that you're going to be looking for. And that's the case. You only have to pick 2. I would just pick a different one. But this is an interesting question to kind of delve into if you really want to see what that could look like. Compare the sentence structure in the frantic scenes of chapter 24 to the calmer scenes in chapter 26. How does the author use sentence length to develop a shift in tone? I really like this one. You want to talk about how the tone shifts though. Like he already says frantic, and then it shifts to calm, right? So I really like the idea that you can look at just the way that sentences are constructed and change an author's tone. And I really think it does. I think it is a lot more frantic, and she does write a way that is more frantic in those earlier chapters. And then it's a lot more peaceful. I'm more relaxed as I'm reading chapter 26. I'm not worried that anything bad might happen. I feel calm, like it says. So how does that happen? How does she find a way to make that happen? In chapter 26, Maddie observes the people returning to the city. How does her specific point of view, having survived the plague, affect the reader's interpretation of those who fled? I don't remember the exact pages in chapter 26. I think it's the second or third page of the chapter. These are some quotes that I found. This is really the main thing that I found talking about it. So it is interesting to see them coming back as if nothing had happened, whereas Maddie has seemingly lived through a war zone. Okay, explain how the cold, crisp air of the frost acts almost as a character in the story. How does the setting change rescue the plot from its most dangerous point? So the frost does kind of come in like a character. It comes in and it takes care of things that, a character could take care of on its own. The characters could not taken care of on its own. Who knows how much longer the fever may have lasted without this frost coming in. Compare the historical details of the frost in Fever 1793 to the outdoor survival facts in the California Forester article. How do both texts use nature as both a villain and a savior? This is a multi-part question. This is a challenging question. It's a rewarding question, though. You've got to go back. You've kind of already done a lot of the legwork on this, but now instead of comparing to Maddie's survival techniques, you got to compare it to the frost. And then the last one, I don't know where this is in the thing, but the fever was a fire that refused to be quenched. Why do we do figurative language? Like, why not just say it was hard to cure? Why do we have to say refused to be quenched? How does it add to the story? What does it add to the story? What does it make you think of? Right? It adds all of these things, right? So it's just an interesting way to change it. A lot of you guys like to answer this question, these figurative language questions. So I just want to talk about, like, why do we write figurative language in the first place? It's kind of what you're looking at here. All right, guys. And as you know, figurative vocabulary down here at the bottom, they're just one word answers. All right. Thank you guys for watching. If you have any questions as you're working on the questions, please let me know. We are almost done with the questions. So that's great news, I'm sure, for a lot of you. All right. Bye, everybody.